Well, at the end of the little alley beside Violet's house was their parting. It was 10 days. What an amazing 10 days since Lance at death's edge had arrived at that front door. But now he was healthy. They hugged. You can imagine that Elaine, of course, cried. Of course. Then he, then Lance got in his bike and he pedaled up to the end of Astalot Street and turned, but he stopped. He got off his bike, and then he waved to them, and they could see that sleeve, that orange sleeve, waving, which seemed a little bit funny, but Elaine was in no mood to even smile. She was heartbroken. But then he got back on his bike and pedaled on up Avalon Street. Now or Avalon Avenue. Now the two women stood there for a little bit, not knowing what to say really. They'd been changed by his presence. He'd been changed as well. But they went back inside, and now there's a legend about a woman named Elaine that doesn't deal well at all. It's a very similar story, and she doesn't deal well at all when this happens to that Elaine. But our Elaine was made of sterner stuff, as somebody said, and she was heartbroken, and she did cry, and she went up to her room, but she took the pandery with her, and she, before very long, she turned her computer on and watched on YouTube how you tune a pandery, and she got it tuned up, and then she learned how she could strum a little bit, and before long she was singing. Now she was singing sad songs, but they were those songs from they were Georgian folk songs, and she sang, and that didn't really, well, it maybe helped a little bit, but after a while then she stopped and thought, well, let me try reading. I'm going to go back to reading some Tennyson. And she was just now finishing the chapter on the coming of Arthur, and she turned a page, and what do you suppose it said? The title of the next chapter was Lancelot and Elaine. And she thought, wow, what are the odds of that? And she looked ahead at the table of contents now, and she saw that there was a book called Merlin and Vivian. There was a book called The Holy Grail, and there was a book called Lynette, or Gareth and Lynette, and several others as well. And she thought, isn't that something? And so she went back to reading, seeing what that would tell. And for her part, Violet, she thought, well, she had so much to think about. She had this scroll, but she wasn't going to open that yet because Edgy was due to arrive by lunch, and that was only a couple hours away, and she wanted him there when she opened it. After all, if it was the Holy Grail, if we were to treat it like the Holy Grail, he'd maybe know how to treat it as especially special. So she didn't open that. Instead, she thought, well, I'll go back to my weaving. But her heart wasn't in it. No, she was thinking, maybe I'll make a basket. Maybe I'll start a basket, because baskets were going to be the fashion of the season, she predicted for Richland. And she thought, well, that's a good idea. But she still didn't do it yet. She just had too much to think about. But those craftsman hands of hers, they were going to have to be doing something. And she knew she was going to have to come up with some kind of a project. Now, Lance, for his part, he continued west on Avalon Street Avenue for a little while, then turned left onto North Tolkien Street. That's the one that went up around behind the high school. There were the three avenues that spread out. There were, avenues at that point. On the left was Chaucer Ave, Shakespeare Ave, Spencer Ave. He took the middle one. It's the same route he had before. Went across Wordsworth Street, Coleridge Street, Shelley Street, and noticed all these streets going again. And he was mostly concentrating on getting going. And he rode. It wasn't until he got all the way past Thoreau Lane. By that time, they called them lanes, and that was the end of this series. And that was at the top of that long, long rise where he thought of it as the hill of shame, and he thought that's the oak of shame, or the tree of shame. And when he looked down and saw his sleeve, but in a way he was grateful for even that, because he had learned a lesson. He had been changed. What an unbelievable 10 days he had had. Then he was heading down, gently downhill, and his thoughts turned back to Elaine. And what he thought of all that time spent together, was the afternoon that they spent walking hand in hand down by the park, down by the river, and how she'd sung. Now, he wasn't much of a singer, and he didn't have that memory that not even close to what Elaine had, but he remembered sort of how that song went. Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine, I'll taste your strawberries, I'll drink your sweet wine. A million tomorrows may all pass away, ere I forget all the joy that is mine today. He even remembered a little more. Can't be contented with yesterday's glories, can't live on promises winter to spring. Now is my moment, and this is my story. I'll laugh and I'll cry and I'll sing. Today, while the blossoms still cling to the vine, I'll taste your strawberries, I'll drink your sweet wine. A million tomorrows may all pass away, ere I forget all the joy that is mine today. Here endeth the telling of the first book of the tale of the Pergola pump.